most of you, okay, thank you, Ashley and Cameron. Most of you sent me a note on how you want to be described on the second page, what is now the second page, working group members. What I was aiming for was at least a minimal or semblance of a job title and a location. So, and some of you on this call, I see I have either a location or a job title, but not both. So if you're willing to give me a little more information, just send me an email. I'd love to finish that up as we move to what will hopefully be a final draft. All right, what I'd like to do in the next hour is I want to just outline what Representative Lamar and I have been talking about in terms of how, you're on. Hello, Kylie, and so I see Representative Lamar. So what I want to cover is some ideas on what steps we may collectively take to get this to a truly final draft, a publishable draft, one that we could start thinking about subjecting to real formatting and graphics and printing to make it the final product look nice. Query who does that. I don't know if the state staff does that, but that's a question. So how we vet the final product. There are on Monday, Representative Lamar and I will speak to as the working group representatives to the full commission meeting, which subject to final review with Representative Lamar, I think would be the status of our report, still in draft, but pretty much, that we've now filled out all the substantive pieces, and I'll report on whatever we decide today is our final vetting process. I will give a very brief summary of our review of the 100+ filed plans. And most importantly, they've asked us to review at least preliminarily, our recommendations. So that will be our 5 or so minute report on Monday, and you're all certainly welcome to tune in on that. So to start off a discussion, let me outline my initial thoughts on where we go from here. First is I would like to ship this around to vet it with what I will call stakeholders, which would include at least what I'll call the housing community, which the people who participate in the Partnership for Strong Communities, housing advocates. I would like Rick Porth to take the lead in having whoever at CCM might want to take a look at it. I'd like to go back to the leadership of the state chapter of the American Planning Association, and then there's a couple of land use attorneys that I know have been following our work, and I'd like to make sure that there's another set of eyes on the document so that we don't say anything wrong. Second, sort of a different angle on that is, not surprising that since I had had a hand in putting together the draft, that I think at this point it may be too land use regulation focused, and I want to make sure that we are faithful to our charge from the legislature. I want to make sure that we properly reflect what the report says about the state plan of conservation and development and the con plan. In other words, I'd now like to take a step back from what we have drafted and just make sure that we have touched all those bases. And then we have some appendices to fill in. So let me stop there. Give me your thoughts on to whom, where we might vet and I'm talking about over the next 2 to 3 weeks, not 6 months. So if you want to chime in with any thoughts as to who, and certainly you don't have to get my approval or, Representative Lamar's approval. If there are people you think would be interested and would give us some good perspectives and comments, by all means, this is the time to ship it out to them and say, I'm in a committee that's working on this report. Would you take a look at it? So, I mean, if thousands of comments come in over the transom, we'll deal with that, but I don't think that will be too much of a burden. So if you want to do that, this is the time to do that. So let me just stop there. And Betsy, I think some of your members, I think would, and Bruce, some of your colleagues would also want to look at it.
Yes, absolutely. We can send to a subset of our board and make sure that they have the opportunity to weigh in.
Okay. All right. And Bruce, the people in OPM or in your orbit that you think would want to look at it?
I'll ask and see how widely people want to look at it.
Okay.
Beyond my own program, I don't know who might be interested, but I'll look into it. Sure.
Okay. Matt, what about you? You're okay? Matt Mendel, I'm sorry.
What about some of the COGs? Taking a look at any of those
That's Betsy.
directors of COGs?
Council of Small Towns, that's Betsy Guerra.
Right, no, COGs, like West COG, having someone from West COG take a look at
COGs. Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. The answer is yes. And which reminds me that I would also try to ship it out to the handful of consultants, one of which is Don Poland, who's on our committee, John Guskowski down in Essex, the consultants who did Jocelyn Eyre, who we heard from in March, who did a couple of the plans. Actually, I'd love to get their reaction. So I will send it to them.
What about CBIA? They make sense or not make sense?
Yeah. Do we know? I don't have a good current contact at CBIA, but if you do, Matt. Okay.
Yeah, I do. I have a couple of them.
Okay. Yep, that would be good. And then Francis Pickering, I believe, at WestCog is on the larger commission, so I'll just make sure he looks at it.
Okay.
And Christy Stewart. And okay. And I'll ask Amanda Kennedy at CCOG, since she was very interested. Okay. All right. Matt Danzer, Michael Trudikowitz, Kathleen, Michael Hernandez, Kylie, Will Lamont, anybody else you would suggest?
I work with Citizens Community Collaborative at Yale, and I've been talking to them about it, so I'd like to run it by them at our meeting next week. So
okay, good. Yeah, and by the way, it might be, that's a good point, Michael. It might make sense for you to hold off until after Monday's full commission meeting before we ship it out to I just see what any reaction that we might incorporate. And by the way, I do have comment. Well, we're going to get to comments that I received in the last 24 hours from Matt Mandel and Emily McAvoy, and then Roland Lamar has sent me a couple comments. So the next draft will incorporate those comments. Okay, that's good. Kathleen, Matt Danzer.
Would it make sense to send it to the Realtors Association?
Yep.
Someone at the Realtors?
Yeah, is that Jim Heckman or?
I don't know who the head of it is. I would have to look that up.
Okay, I think Jim is their lobbyist at least.
Right, Jim.
Yeah.
I think Jim Heckman would be the appropriate person, Tim.
Okay. Yes, that would be the good idea. Tell him I said hi. Claudette, do you have your hand up? Go ahead.
I'm about to be a board member for Columbus House, so I was thinking of them.
Is that Carl Rodenheiser? Did I say it?
Well, I don't know all of their names yet because it's a new position for me. So
Okay.
But I'm working close with Amy, and she's with Legal Aid.
Okay. That's okay. That's it. So can you take the lead in sending them a copy?
Yes, sure.
Okay.
I can do that this evening.
Good. Thank you. Let's see. Everybody else?
I'll just, I
Yes.
don't,
Go ahead, Matt.
this could open a sort of a larger population, and maybe we find some way to limit it, but maybe if there were any towns that had affordable housing plans that you thought were particularly good, it might be worthwhile to send it to the housing commissioner or whoever was in charge of putting together their plan to see if the recommendations that we're proposing, seem reasonable to them as people who've put together a plan.
Okay, that's a good idea. Some of what you just said would be covered by what I was suggesting about getting it out to the consultants that did a couple of those plans. There are actually probably 1 or 2 or 3 consultants who consistently did, had more specific, had more specific recommendations. I'll do that, Matt Danzer, and I think that'll be overlapped with what I just mentioned. Rick, we're just talking about further vetting of the report, and I nominated you to take it to CCM, whoever. Oh, I think we lost Rick. Okay. All right, Emily McAvoy, you said you were going to put some more narrative to the end of what is now section 5. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, it's just a bit inconsistent right now. So
yeah, no, the formatting needs some work.
I don't think it needs a whole lot of detail, but I'm writing it into sentences, and I should be able to send it over tomorrow or Monday.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Okay. Representative Lamar, do you anything you want to chime in on right at the moment before I move on to something else?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that people understand that when we go out more broadly to a number of stakeholders, that similar to all of us, we came into this process with, a specific, maybe potentially narrow mindset about what we wanted to accomplish or what we were hoping to see. And we've had a pretty deliberative and, I think, encompassing conversation for the better part of 6 months now. And they won't have the same sort of relationship with the document that we did, where we've worked out a number of issues, where we've thought through a number of concerns, where we've tried to research additional avenues that other companies may have taken. So, let them know that this is a product that has incorporated a number of concerns throughout its process, and they may see something that they specifically don't like, but that is, part of how progress works. And rather than having, all of us come back to this group with all of us saying, well, I talked to my stakeholder and they're no-go, so I'm a no-go. Let's try to have a deliberative conversation with those folks as well, and come back with viewpoints that can be discussed openly and honestly the same way we've done it up to this point.
Yes, very, very good. Understood.
Yeah, that was very helpful. Hi, Tim Lamont from City of Norwalk. I would like to share, Norwalk, we have one homeless services. So I would like to share it with Michelle and Representative Lamar. Thank you for that context, because I was curious around, how we're presenting it. So you just articulated very eloquently, and I think I can do that with some of our stakeholders in that manner. So I appreciate that.
Okay, Lamont, say that one more time. Who are you going to?
Open Doors. Open Doors in Norwalk. Michelle is the
okay.
executive director. They are our only provider in that space here in
Yes.
Norwalk. So I think she'll be. I would love for her to look at it, and I have a relationship with her, so I think we'll probably have a pretty good conversation.
Okay, I thought you said you were going to Open Doors, and I was waiting for the name of the organization. That is the name.
Okay. That's them.
Okay, all right, I got it. They're a good.
Yeah, they
group.
had the name first before Open Doors Fairfield County.
Very good. Okay, they have a good track record. Okay, Mr. Mandel, the floor is yours, sir.
Tim, I think Mike had his hand up before me too.
Mike, go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just a quick comment back to the point you were making about sending it back to some of those commissions that wrote the affordable housing reports. I was part of the Stanford one, so I'm happy to. Good. connect us to those folks, because that had the highest marks from the Fairfield County plans. And just being part of that group, I can tell you that the consulting firm was great that we hired.
Is that AKF?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
we also, like the folks who were on the commission too, it wasn't just planning folks, it was people from the private sector, like some people who were sort of like experts on not just the history, but kind of the policy part of it. So happy to make those connections as well.
Yeah, and not to give away secrets, but I will tell you that the Stanford plan was one of the few that went to specific areas of the city and looked at the zoning regulations and said, here's how we can modify our past, well, not just the regulations, but the city's financial approach to maintaining economic diversity, mortgage subsidy and rent subsidies. Anyway, so you're absolutely right. That was certainly one of the better plans, if not one of the best. So thank you for that. That I would be very interested to hear their feedback. Okay. I'm sorry. Any other hands that are up that I didn't catch at the moment? Okay. Matt, I would welcome going through your list of concerns. Do you want to tee them up for us, or?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, I think we've come a long way, and I think this document is getting close to being finished. And Tim, you've done a hell of a job reading all the reports, putting us back together with all the drafts. Hats off to the effort that you put in. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you.
I do have a few things that need to be tweaked. Some things that are, I think, really problematic, and some things that just need to be modified a little bit.
Okay.
I sent earlier a list to Tim. It was a little longer than what you got now because he addressed a bunch of them, but he told me that these other ones we should talk about as a group. I think that's a fine thing. It's supposed to be a collaborative effort. And so the first one's on page 8, where they're talking about the Alice and the 137. That area is talking about what is affordable housing. And in that statement, it says that we then should be making a multifamily housing. That should just go down into a different area. There's nothing wrong with stating the issue that, there needs to be 137,000 based on mathematics, but the statement about how to rectify it should be later on. And I spotted it to be in section 7 sub B. So I think you don't remove any of this information, you just move it around. Leave one part there and then pick it up and move it down. And I don't expect all of us to throw up the screen here and start dickering with it, but that's an explanation for that piece on how to bifurcate them. So that's one.
Okay, Matt, I just want to say, why do you think, we're talking in that section about racial and economic segregation. Why do you think that reference to Open Communities Alliance and 137,000, why do you think that's out of place there?
No, I didn't think that the need is out of place. I think the recommendation to build more multifamily housing is out of place. It's what the section is. Okay. What is affordable housing and why? Okay. There shouldn't be a pitch for how to solve it there. We're solving it later on down below. So keep all the information's cool. It's just bifurcate the two pieces. The one where it says there's a need for 137,000, blah, 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 blah. But the part that says multifamily housing will solve it, stick that down in 7 sub C when we're talking about explanations.
Okay, just one more question. Okay, yeah. I hear what you're saying. And I think Finn was the original lead author in some of this. I read this to say, example, more than a quarter of the 5+ unit buildings in Connecticut are in 4 municipalities. That to me says multifamily is concentrated in the cities, and that's a form of segregation. So why is that out of place?
I didn't say that was out of place. Now I'm missing where I'm looking for it. Hang on.
Okay. And anybody else? The floor is open if you want to chime in. Or maybe the answer is we put it in both places, but I thought this fit substantively where it is, but
it's the line, an assessment. It says an assessment completed by Open Communities Alliance suggests Connecticut needs 137 affordable housing. And that's it. So given the immense deficit of affordable housing, one of the most cost-effective ways is to address the deficit with multifamily housing. But that's not what is affordable housing. That's the section. So I'm saying take that concept and just stick it in the proper spot. That's all.
Okay.
It's just taking it. We're supposed to be giving all the reasons. What is affordable housing and why we need it? Bing, 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 bing. Solving the problem is later on in the document.
Okay. All right.
It's a
I hear
formatting
you.
issue. It's not
okay. I thank you. I understand better now.
yeah, good.
Okay.
It's not content. It's format.
Okay.
Page 10, where they're talking about a mandate. It should be instead of saying they sometimes the state should direct it. It's more like we're supposed to be giving guidance. I think we all agreed at one point we're not supposed to be dissing the municipalities or telling them they did anything wrong. It's all suggestions. Say, here are the things that you guys can do. Here are the things you understand there's a need for affordable housing. Here are the things that we should do. So I think that line should read, the state must encourage and offer guidance to take steps rather than mandate take steps. The state shouldn't mandate to take steps. Again, it's a slight tweak. So I don't know if we're going to resolve this today, but I just wanted to explain them. 13 and 14, where we're talking about the plans. Some are good and some's bad. That's absolutely correct. It's the tone of that in saying that those that have done a poor job, it's disappointing. Maybe the word should be needs improvement.
Okay. Well, you notice I did take out the 4 where I had 4 quotes from actual plans. I took that out. I said, okay, maybe making fun of them, but
I still read it as a little harsh. I think that just could be massaged. It's not a grand problem, but the goal is for the municipalities to read it and feel comfortable and not say, oh, these guys are telling us we're screw ups. It's more like, here are great ideas for you to embrace. And I think that's where we need to continue to move forward. I see Michael.
I would agree with that sentiment, Matt. When I read through it, I was a little surprised because I felt like we've done a great job of developing a report that is avoiding being very subjective. And this read a little snarky to me. I don't think it adds anything to phrase things in this manner. And I started going through to edit it, and I'd be happy to do that. But, things like the several so-called reports, I think it's important to remind people that the statute, even when it was amended in 2021, doesn't provide a lot of specificity. And so I think, we should avoid calling out certain reports or characterizing them as somewhat deficient when in fact there really wasn't a lot of specificity in the legislation. To that end, I think it would be helpful to include in the appendix the actual verbiage from the statute as amended by the Public Act 21-29, so people can understand kind of what their charge was to municipalities.
Yes, we will
And
do
Tim,
that.
Tim, I think this is where I struggle a little bit with how to take the reality of why we're in the moment we're in and why we have the guidance that we have and why the statute reads the way that it does. Local communities have for years come to the legislature and said, don't tell us what to do. Let us figure out what we are supposed to do. And then when we do that, when we don't provide very specific guidance and instead say, okay, we're not going to do this top-down, one-size-fits-all approach. You come up with your own plan. You tell us how you're going to accomplish it. We then hear complaints, well, you didn't tell us what to do. You didn't provide specificity. You didn't direct us adequately. And that's where I get a little frustrated and where I think it's appropriate to recognize that for literally decades now, we have been told that just provide guidance and we will figure it out ourselves. And community after community has failed to do so. So I think it's warranted for there to be a little bit of a highlighting that these plans are woefully insufficient. And this planning process was generally designed by local communities because they did not want to be told that they had to, in the original versions of this legislation, starting back in 2015 and 16, when we were thinking through recommendations from the Connecticut Fair Housing Working Group and the Affordable Housing Task Force, the goal was to hear back from local communities about how they intended to approach this issue without a top-down directive. And so for us to not highlight that we are in this moment requesting affordable housing plans from local communities in which they were giving multiple years to accommodate, and then we gave them additional time after they failed to meet that original deadline, I think it's appropriate to highlight that these plans are insufficient to actually accomplishing the goal we had in mind. Now, I agree that it might come across as snarky. I think Betsy's right. Like, if I read it through that lens, I think she is right. That it may come across as snarky, and I think, you know, is that helpful? Probably not. But I do think it's warranted. This criticism is warranted, and I don't know the best. This is me coming to a conclusion with, I don't know what the right answer is. But I think Betsy's probably right that it's not helpful to come across as snarky, and maybe it does so. But I think the criticism has to be heard and understood, that you can't have it both ways. You can't say you want to come up with your own local plans and then not do so. You can't say you don't want the state to direct you to do things. You want us to provide guidance and suggest things, and then you don't come up with anything useful or constructive. And then you can't say, frankly, at the end of it, here are our local affordable housing plans. Yes, we included nothing that will ever move the ball forward. Is this what you want? We're not sure, because you didn't tell us exactly what you wanted. I think that's the balance I'm intellectually struggling with.
Okay.
Could I offer a
yeah.
potential solution and see if it
Yep.
works?
Go
I mean,
for it.
I think the point is right that the inadequacies of some of the reports does need to be mentioned, because ultimately what we're trying to do is provide guidance on what a good plan looks like. But maybe instead of phrasing it as, you know, these are disappointments and these towns did something wrong by making these their affordable housing plans, maybe the approach is that at the end of the day, there hasn't been, we're providing the guidance that the towns need in order to know what these plans should look like. And so maybe we frame it as, after reviewing the plans, we saw that there were certain plans that in the working group's judgment, or in the commission's judgment, did not meet our expectations. And so the goal of this report is to provide a roadmap for for all towns to make sure that their plans are up to snuff. And so not saying you did a bad job, but saying we recognize you didn't have guidance previously, and now we're going to give you that guidance so that your next plan is better.
Right,
Okay.
exactly, and that they could benefit from what we're providing them. That's the
Because I take the point that it's frustrating, Representative Lamar, but I don't know if a cathartic report for us, or or for people who've been involved in this for a long time and have frustrations, is going to help. And so maybe trying, and maybe in for you one last time to say, this is how to do it now. We're not going to attack you. We're just going to tell you this is how to do it, and prove us wrong, right? Show us that you can do this.
Yeah, Matt, before we go to the other hands, I'm going to push back a little bit. There was an active undercurrent in a lot of plans. I'll just say it like it was, thumbing their nose at the process. I mean, some people came right out and said, we're a small town. Thank you very much, but we have no desire to participate in this process. And then there were, and I actually took I was offended by the 2 or 3 where they photocopied the housing section of the plan of development, put a cover on it and said, this is our report. I mean, it gave the impression of spending at least 5 minutes on the report. And that just seemed to be sort of, really thumbing your nose at the process. But my assumption was, especially the towns that hired consultants, they know what a plan is, but there was just this recurrent undercurrent of stay away from specifics, stay away from anything that might rankle feathers around the town. And I just, you know, I will, you know, my job is not to impose my will. It's to, you know, reflect your collective views on this. And I get that. But I think the towns need a very stern message. And that message is not, oh, well, you didn't understand. I think there are a lot of towns that understood exactly what the charge was and they just ducked intentionally. I'm just giving you my impression after reading all the reports. So
Tim, yeah, I think that's right, Tim, because I mean, I think it's fair to see what the results of these affordable housing reports have given us and make recommendations and highlight. I think all of those suggestions are correct. I would highlight again that this was supposed to be the one last chance to prove that you're taking this seriously, because for 30 years you have not complied with state laws that have directed that you must zone for multifamily units. There are, you know, dozens of towns that never actually did so. Like this was supposed to be the one last chance. This was actually a concession to the communities so that we did not go forward with state regulations that were being proposed in 2015, 16, 17, and 18. It was like, okay, prove to us that you can do this on your own locally. Prove to us this was that moment for many of these towns. It was actually the process that the towns asked for, so that they could prove that they were taking it seriously. You can't. And I'm in that moment where, again, I'm frustrated that we are lobbied heavily at the Capitol every year saying, don't tell us what to do, let us figure it out ourselves. And then when we do, we hear back, wait a minute, we don't have the capacity to figure it out ourselves. Tell us what to do. And like that's the frustration that I'm in. And you're right. I don't want to take out my years of frustration into this process, because this working group has actually been collaborative and deliberative, and it's been really positive to be a part of it. I worry that by not being clear in what our frustrations and disappointments are with what we've seen, we're opening the door to another 5-year, like, just give us more time. Let us try again.
And I guess my thought would be, you know, the report should sort of stand forever as this is how to write an affordable housing plan. This is why affordable housing is important. And I like that aspect of the report. I think to the extent that you've had, you know, years of frustrating experiences with certain towns and the lobbying that you've described, this report's not going to fix any of that. The only thing that would fix any of that is legislation. So I think ideally the report would stand as this is what a plan should look like. And to the extent that the legislature is amenable, maybe some of the recommendations of the report end up in law about what a plan must include down the road. And there are some recommendations, I think, to the effect of, you know, these are things that the legislature could consider going forward. But I'm not sure that the report itself is the place for that. I'm open to disagreement, but that was sort of my initial instinct.
Okay, before Kylie, you're next, but I what I suggest is Matt Mandel has accurately diagnosed the pages. We're talking about pages 13 and 14. So if you want to send me some wordsmithing that might to consider, please do that. Kylie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that we've talked about this before. There's multiple audiences for this report. Some of them are towns, which may take this and hopefully will use this advice in preparing their next plan. Some may be state agency folks who are in charge of administering this process, who may look at this plan and build certain components of this into recommendations or guidance they submit to towns. But ultimately, we were asked to produce this plan in part to provide the legislature and legislators with information about the plans and where to go next with them. And I'm fairly certain, with all due respect to Representative Lamar, that most legislators are not going to sit down and read every single one of these housing plans like Tim has done. And in fact, if there's anyone on this call other than Tim who's read all the plans, please raise your hand. I have read a few of them and have colleagues who, like Tim, have sat down and gone through all of them. And I think if you've gone through all of them, there's the plans that accomplish something. There's the plans that that tried but largely missed the mark or really didn't go far enough. And then there's a large group of the plan. The bulk of these plans aren't really plans, to Tim's point, right? And in some cases, they're sort of in this category of being like silly offensive, like copying your POCD or whatever. I think it's important, in addition to providing guidance for towns moving forward, to Representative Lamar's point and to Betsy's point, I think that's the most important part of this. But I think failing to provide context of how the first round of this went is not giving legislators the full information that they need to understand why we're proposing the things we are. And I think having some commentary on the outcome of these first plans and sort of broadly what they included and didn't include, and the vast majority of them did X but didn't do Y, is really important for their ability to make decisions about how to either create legislation or, again, help direct agencies to assist towns with the next round. And so for those of you who've ever been engaged in trying to conduct any sort of legislative history and understand why legislators made the decisions they do, these kind of commission reports can be helpful in that. I think having some documented history of what the outcomes of these original plans were and why these recommendations are set forth, it's important to have those two things together in the same report. So while you may want to take out the more editorialized language of so-called plans, I think having quotations from specific plans in there was really good, Tim. I liked that. I think providing factual information about, well, approximately this number of plans contained site selection criteria, or this number of this percentage of plans, identified specific zoning changes, things like that, that give them factual context, I think would be really helpful. And I think including quotes and language from both plans that were good, plans that maybe weren't so great, without naming the towns, which I think you didn't do, was good. And I also think you added the qualifiers about noting that towns may not have had resources to do this, that they didn't have a lot of guidance. I thought you did a good job of providing those qualifiers alongside I don't want to call it the critique, but at least the outcome of that. But I think having the recommendations without the analysis, in the real analysis that, these plans missed the mark for a whole variety of reasons, is important for legislators and other decision makers to know.
Okay, very good. Michael Stukowitz.
Kylie just said everything I wanted to say, but if I could add on to, well spoken, if I could add on to it, as a professor, sometimes it's tough. I'm grading all these papers and there's some really good ideas, but I may not agree with it. So we use rubrics to try to get to try to be neutral. And I could very easily, see us applying a rubric, and then folks have an idea. Why did that? Again, there's just too much judgment right now, and too much judgment language, and too much editorializing. But I think we could, produce a nice section, because we should be presenting best practices. It's okay to say Stanford, we're going to give them a 90 or a 99 because this is why we gave them points, and this is how we judge them, and then or how we graded them, because we don't want to judge them. And even that town that did the conservation report, we asked, that's one of the things we asked. Look at your conservation report. So they get a few points, right? Everybody gets a few points. So I want to look at best. I'm an appreciative inquiry practitioner. I want to tell everybody what they did right, and then take it from there. We don't have to tell them what they did wrong. We could just tell it, what did everybody do right, and maybe come up with a rubric. And I'd be more than willing to try to help you craft that.
Okay, well said. There's a happy medium in here somewhere, and I'm just writing down what everybody's saying. I like the analogy of grading papers. Yeah, we'll give Stanford a 90 and see how they react to that. Okay. All right, Matt Mandel. Time is running on.
Yeah, well, I don't foresee us getting through all of these.
Yeah, your top three, I think, remaining are fair share.
There are four.
Okay, I had the 10% is not a goal.
10% fair share, inclusionary zoning, and fund.
All right,
I think all of them need to be fleshed.
All right, why don't you take all four and just kind of put your concern out there, and
okay,
as much as we can do it.
10%, saying that 10% getting to 10% affordability is not a goal seems to be counterintuitive to 830G being, if you get to 10%, you no longer have to be subjected to it. And towns are actively working towards a goal, and having a goal is important. Now, is 10% ultimately the answer? It may not be, but I think 10% has to be put in there that, hey, try to get there. Here's the goal, get there. And, you know, some places might need 15%. That's a possibility. And that leads to the fair share aspect. But I think saying that 10% is not a goal is a hard thing to swallow for towns where in there, a lot of their reports, they're saying our goal is to get to 10%, you know, affordability. Greenwich has that. I mean, if you just Google it, 10% Connecticut goal, and you get, you know, Greenwich's report. So I think it should be in there. We can talk about the greater need for affordability there and greater numbers, but saying that it's not a goal is problematic for me, because I think it is a goal. I mean, I know my town saying, hey, how are we going to get to 10%? We may never get to 10%. I don't think we can, but it's still a goal. So that's that.
But what they're saying is we need to get out from under 830G.
Well, of course, isn't that the whole aspect? 830G is, well,
no,
it's both though. 830G is there. It's the stick to get people to do it. If it wasn't there, people may not be doing it. But since the stick is there and it says, hey, you need to get to 10%, it's now a goal for everybody. It feeds upon itself.
I have it on good authority that the Department of Housing is in complete agreement with the idea that 10% is not a goal. It's not a standard. It's not intended to tell towns if you get to 10%, you have satisfied your need for more affordable housing. That's
well, that would be a hell of a sell to the towns that see it as such. I think that's it. May be, you may be right, Tim. That might be the fact, but de facto, the 10% related to 830G is a goal in everybody's mind.
But the towns don't see 10% as a goal. They see getting out they see a moratorium as a goal. Right. So for them, the 10% number is not relevant to begin with, right? I think the idea that 10% is a goal rather than the minimum expectation under 8-30G is kind of the point, right? 8-30G isn't saying get to 10% and you're good. It's saying get to 10% and you're not going to be subject to this stick. And ultimately, the goal is to have towns with affordable housing that make them livable. And for each town, the correct amount of affordability is going to be different. But I think the idea that 10% is a goal goes against the point that there's no one size fits all.
Yeah, good point, Matt. Okay.
Well, somewhere we have to talk about, you know, the concept that people see it as a goal, because I do. I just look at it and say, okay, I mean, I don't think that Westport will ever get to 10%. It physically probably would be an impossibility unless you break down the infrastructure completely to get there. I think a number of other towns have the same feeling. I mean, maybe that's why some of them, you know, just copy their conservation development and say, here you go, because we'll never get there. I mean, some towns, my town is actively trying. So I think there needs to be a nod to the concept, at least. If you guys are dead set on it, that it's nearly not a goal, but I think there has to be a nod to the concept that 830G and 10% is where people perceive a goal. And you want the municipalities to say, hey, we're going to try to get there. Give them something to go for. Because if you give them a moving target, they're going to get frustrated.
Okay.
That's my thing.
I know many of our small towns would be concerned about imposing a 10% affordable housing goal, because there are towns that are very rural that just can't meet that goal. And I think the developers aren't coming into there with 830G developments because they realize it's not going to be lucrative because there's no demand for housing in those areas of real any kind, let alone affordable. So, you know, again, I think we would be concerned about imposing it as a goal. I've also heard from the Department of Housing that there was a number that was kind of floated at the legislature and adopted as part of the 830G appeals process, but it was not intended to be a statewide or town by town goal.
Right. And Matt, you make a good point. The towns need a goal, but 10% is not it. It's much higher. So
Oh, that's going to be very disappointing to many of them.
I know that, which is sort of they're disabusing them of the idea that if you reach 10%, you have no more need for affordable housing. But then there's saying putting a qualitative or quantitative goal at a higher level, which I think is what the Department of Housing and the housing advocates would say. All right.
Well, that leads directly to fair share, which those numbers, as long as I get my 4 points, so let me just quickly, so we get them out. Fair share, the numbers for fair share are far higher than the 10%. And those numbers, so let's take Greenwich, that has in some calculations, 3,000 units of affordable housing. That's just the affordable part. To enable to actually do it with the market rate that would be necessary, you might be looking at 7, 8 to 10,000 units that would need to be built with 30 inclusionary zoning of, let's say, 30% to get there. Those numbers are tough. Now, fair share does not exist in Connecticut. It is a theory. It does exist in New Jersey, and New Jersey's housing has actually, prices have gone up dramatically. And I don't know, there's no correlation, obviously, but the point is that fair share is a scary number. 10% with 830G is one thing, but then telling some towns, let's say Westport, where the number could be 2,000, 2,500, that you have to build that many pieces of affordable housing plus the market rate, ultimately will have them just stick their head in the sand and say, you know what, forget it. We're not even going to try because we never can get there.
Yeah.
So that's my fear of using fair share as part of this.
Yeah. Well, Matt, reading through your comments, this is one thing I'm going to agree with you on. Fair share has certainly not yet been adopted. It's been proposed in the legislature. So I'm starting to wonder whether by putting fair share in as a metric or a goal or a standard, maybe at least we're getting ahead of the legislature, which everything else we're recommending is based on Public Act 2129. So maybe
or call it affordable need rather than fair share. What's your affordable need? And then we're not being political and trying to bring in some politics, but we're saying, hey, there's a need. What's your affordable need? Go for it. Now, maybe it's more than 10%. You got to figure that out. The towns have to figure it out.
Okay.
So 2 more things because we're running short on time.
Yep,
inclusionary zoning, it seems to be relegated to the back burner. And also then there's a caveat saying it's actually bad. In Westport, I was the one who introduced inclusionary zoning somewhere in the late 2000s, 2007, 2008. And it was put into our zones, and we've been actually getting affordable housing. We're actually getting it in our town because of inclusionary zoning. Some towns could benefit from that. I don't know why it's being backburned. I think it should be a relevant piece and saying, hey, you can do a inclusionary zoning if it works for you. The idea that would stop developers from coming in larger and richer communities is not the case. Darien, New Canaan, Westport, the developers are banging down the door to build. And they're okay, hey, we'll build 20% affordable with it, or 10% or 15%. So in the richer communities, it works. Now, in some of the communities that are stressed, it may not work. But let's say Norwalk, which is a city that's already reached 10% affordability, they still require 10% affordability to stay there. They built 3,000 units at market rate. Prices are still going up. We're not seeing a decrease. So just building housing doesn't seem to create affordability. But the 10% inclusionary ensures that there is affordability and is not the goal that we're trying to do. So I think it should be in there.
All right, Matt, on this one, I think you and I are actually closer than you think, because I thought I tried to make the point in the note that it works. If it works anywhere, it works in the more affluent towns like the ones you just mentioned. So, and I tried to
remove the caveat and take it out of the extra final steps pieces. Give it its own line like the rest of the concepts. It's deserving. I believe it's deserving.
Okay. All right. I see what you're saying.
I've worked for it and mandated, developers hate my guts in town when I come in and say, hey, you build 20% of get the hell out of my town. And you know what? They do. They come in, it's like, okay, fine, we'll do it. We'll bite the bullet. I mean, sometimes it's off-site, sometimes it's on-site, whatever we can make it work, but it creates the affordability, and isn't that the goal? Last piece is
Tim, hold on. To that point of inclusionary, I think recommendations have to be worded carefully, because inclusionary housing ordinances, the empirical evidence on them isn't actually debated, like that they actually suppress housing construction. The I think form that Mr. Mandel incorporated into Westport has actually worked in Westport, which is outstanding. But the empirical evidence across the country doesn't bear the same fruit that he's been able to bear there. And in California, a lot of times you'd have sort of NIMBY-ish groups proposing inclusionary zoning ordinances simply to make it almost impossible to construct housing in their community. So, like, I think it has to be like a carefully constructed inclusionary zoning ordinance can be beneficial in certain markets. Like, I think there has to be some kind of caveat when we discuss how inclusionary zoning policies are crafted, and they have to be, like, I don't want to be too cynical on this, but they have to be done by people who actually care about the end result, like Mr. Mandel did in Westport. I don't know that that would be the case necessarily in other communities.
Well, I mean, that is the point where we're supposed to give a list of options for the municipalities to adopt. This is one of the options. If they don't feel that it's good, they don't do it. But saying that it could be used, I don't know if people put in inclusionary zoning to stop development. I don't see it. I mean, my world is basically Fairfield County, so I don't see it as being used as a stop development. They use it as an ability to make affordable housing. So, however we do it, I'm willing to help work on making it work because I'm a true believer of inclusionary zoning. So,
okay, Bruce Witchen, you had some thoughts on this a couple weeks ago. Do you want anything you want to add?
Yeah, let me turn my camera back on. I did not want to dive into the debate because it's complicated. I see this being a listing of options. I agree wholeheartedly that there are towns in Connecticut that are just like the kinds of places, San Francisco, Manhattan, whatever, where there is such demand in certain locations. Not all of Manhattan, of course, but that there is such demand that it makes sense to put those kinds of requirements there. There are other places where, kind of consistent with what Betsy had said about the 10% quote unquote goal, that it doesn't make sense in some places where it's just not feasible. I think that at this point, this report should be putting options out there, and the state should see how those options are implemented going forward, and in kind of an incremental approach might be changing how the plans are approached the next generation of plans. I don't think we can anticipate everything. I certainly do not think that we should be antagonizing anyone. And I worry that some of this will turn, let's face it, many places, a distinct majority of the people voting and whatnot are not in favor of this thing. We don't want to make more enemies than already exist. We're trying to convince people to try things. And so I think a more incremental, accommodating approach is best.
Okay. All right, Matt Mandel, did you get to all your?
Well,
go ahead, you got one
the
more?
list is longer than this, but the last one is some kind of affordable housing fund. It was also relegated to this little section, the final steps, when it should have aligned to itself. Finding some way to raise money for communities to spend on affordable housing is advantageous. Whether that's through a conveyance tax, whether that's through money that if you're going to fix up your house, you have to pay 0.5% on what you're doing, 1% on this. And that money then can be put into a fund. Fairfield just did it within the last year, that can be spent buying a piece of land to give to the housing authority, buying down market rate units that are being put into your town to become affordable. That's a good thing to have in there and an option for towns. It shouldn't be relegated to the subsection. It should have a line unto itself.
Okay.
Those are the broad strokes. And I think, I'm happy to work on the language to make those pieces work. The rest is, you had that one legalese thing. You're right, Tim, you're a little legalese on the one where someone doesn't have rights in the property next to it. You might reword that a little bit, but
okay.
Those are my four major pieces that I discussed.
All right. Excellent. Thank you for teeing up those points. All right. I'm at my bewitching hour. Actually, we all are. So let me suggest this to just wrap up. I will take all the comments that we discussed today and any wordsmithing that you want to send me over the next couple of days. I will turn around another draft. I'm not going to send it out, and I'm certainly not going to give it to the commission on Monday. This will just be our internal process. But after the commission Monday, I will send out a further draft trying to reflect everybody's comments. And at that point, I think we as a group should kick into gear with sending it out to people who we would like to have review the report. So in other words, I'm asking you to sort of put it in, what's the word, mothballs for until after the commission meeting on Monday and you get the next draft. Is that okay with it as a, Roland, is that okay with you as a timetable?
That makes sense to me.
I'm sorry?
He said yes.
That makes sense to me.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay. All right, good. Okay. Keep rolling.
Tim, thank you for giving me the platform. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You brought up the points that we needed to discuss, and I appreciate that also. All right, any last final words of wisdom for the group? Okay.
When are we meeting next?
That's, well, I think why don't we get through Monday's commission meeting? I want to see what the commission is going to do, but
Okay.
we'll say, Rick, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you. You did an unbelievable job synthesizing weeks, many meetings of discussion and discussions, and really appreciate all the work you've done and your patience with all of us and your work to hold the family together, so to speak.
And let's, the real reason here is I'm married to a saint, so that's what you need. Well, thank you for your kind words. Okay, everybody, have a good night, and we'll talk next week.
Good night.